Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where does that nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? This podcast is designed to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. My catalyst today is Kurt Wilkin. He is the co-founder of HireBetter and author of Who's Your Mike? This episode is brought to you by the Catalyst Sale Game Plan. It's our approach to goal setting and execution. If you go to catalystsale.com/game, you can find more information there. Let's get to the discussion with Kurt. Kurt, it is awesome to have you on the podcast. It's good to meet you in person. I can tell you, I know some people don't like this word, but I was triggered by the title of your book around Who's Your Mike? Because I had recently gone through a situation where I wasn't the right person inside the organization at the right time for the growth that we were looking for in the business. And as I go through that and went through different pieces of burnout and making a transition and all of that, then I get reminded by Who's Your Mike? But thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it. And most of my friends named Mike hate me for the title. And I'm sorry that you were double whammied there. So I'm sure we'll get into that today.
I am happy to get into it. So tell me a bit about the inspiration for the book and the narrative that you decided to go with relative to identifying individual characters that we can all relate with, because in each of the ones that you had highlighted in the book, I've come across those people either in W-2 role or in consulting role or in coaching role or just in community. What was the inspiration for the style of the book?
I'll start with the inspiration for this type of book. I'm in the recruiting business, but I'm not a recruiter by trade. I'm a CPA by trade. I happen to be a bad CPA by trade. But I bought HireBetter 11 years ago, and I felt like the recruiting industry was broken. So that's because most entrepreneurs are reactive with their hiring, and so most recruiters are reactive. But I'm more of a big picture guy. I want to have more of a strategy. So we've developed a strategic approach to recruiting, including assessing your existing team against a future state org chart. So I can go into I can geek out on that for a long time. But long story short, I had a lot of Mikes that I came across in our recruiting business. And so I wrote an article called Who's Your Mike many years ago. And the name Mike is, there's no real person named Mike, but there was an inspiration. And it was so highly regarded that people were like, man, I know who Mike is. I really love what you're doing here. And so that was the story behind Mike. But then as I started to write a book, I said, you know what? I don't want to write a stale business book. I hate most business books. They're boring as shit. And so I said, what could I do different? I learned from stories. I learned from my own experiences first, and I learned from stories. But what if I just had a book about stories about some of these people I might run across and let other entrepreneurs see their own stories in it, and they're going to learn from that? I don't even have to give any advice. I just have to tell you what other people did.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful because you start to relate to names in the book and the characters and how they connect with others. You've got a couple of different characters. Who's your favorite character? Actually, not favorite character. What character is the most common character that comes up in conversations where someone says, hey, I've read this and just felt compelled to either reach out to you or ask a question or whatever it is?
I was going to give the old Jerry Seinfeld line. It depends on, it's like asking me my favorite breath, but no, that's not real. That's not true. My favorite's got to be Mike, because that is almost every entrepreneur has a situation with somebody like Mike who they love, great person. They just simply have outgrown. They've overinflated their title, and now they're just not the right person in that role for the next iteration of growth.
So why do we fall into this trap? As entrepreneurs, we build out these teams. We start to build out amazing scale. We then get into a situation where we can invest in bringing in other resources, fall into the trap of keeping some of the same people in the same seats on the bus, which is kind of the metaphor that a lot of people like to use, is you're one, getting the people on the bus, and then two, making sure they're in the right seats. Why do we fall into the trap of having people stay in some of those seats a little bit too long?
Yeah, and it gets worse than that, Mike, because oftentimes they move them to other seats to try to keep in the organization. And now you've made double and triple the problems. I think most entrepreneurs we lead by our gut, and we're emotionally tied to the people who were in the foxhole with us when we were going through this crazy startup. And so we feel obligated and really a strong tie to these folks. Many of them started off as friends of Kurt, right? Or friends of the founder. And so it's just hard for us to part ways and to make those tough calls. And oftentimes it's a consultant or an advisor or a YPO forum or a Vistage chair or somebody like that that points out our Mike situation to us.
Why do we need that nudge? Why do we get caught up in create those blind spots for ourselves? Why is that perspective shift important?
I think most of us are wimps, and we might know that that's what has to happen, but we don't want to pull the trigger. And that, I say most of us, there's a lot of people who are like, get rid of the asshole, but that's not really, most of us have that tug to keep them.
Right. Yeah. So, and think about what kind of impact that's having on everybody else that's inside the organization, especially when other people inside the organization see it and they wonder, hey, are you wearing clothes? Like, if you can't see this, if you can't feel this, if you can't experience it, how are you as a leader? What are you missing? And where else are we going to miss inside the organization? Is that fair?
That's exactly right. The entrepreneur is going to lose credibility because everyone sees it around them. And again, Mike is one person through the finance realm, but one of my other favorite characters is Bounce Around Betty. And we had a great example in the book of one of our clients who had a partner in the firm that they wanted to keep moving to these other parts of the firm to find a role for her because they loved her. But she wasn't a chief marketing officer. She wasn't a chief operating officer. She wasn't HR, which is where they usually throw somebody as a last ditch resort. And so it led to a whole team of frustrated B and C players.
She gets in there and it's the put me in coach type person. Like, I'm really excited. I want to get a chance. I want to do this. I'm up for the challenge. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. And when you're super early stage and you're scrappy and you've got a lot of generalists inside the organization who are doing multiple roles, you can get away with that for a period of time. But once you start to get into specializing and building scale, then you not only setting your organization back, you're setting your customers back, you're setting your ability to deliver inside the market back.
So that's true. And I'll just give you a caveat. So sometimes Bounce Around Betty is just a disaster everywhere he or she goes, right? And so that's the problem child. There is another version that does great work wherever you put him or her. They're just not the next person to scale it. Okay. And so we have a member of our team, Kelly, who she calls herself Betty because we keep putting her where we need her and she kicks ass at where she goes. But as we continue to scale our own organization, we want to bring in people from the outside who've done it before so that we don't have to learn a lot of lessons the hard way. Kelly is instrumental for our growth, and she's got a place on our team as long as we continue to grow. Just her role might change from time to time. And that's a great employee to have.
So when you're looking at these people and you're going through the evaluation process, there are some instances where that role is going to be good for the organization. That capability is good for the organization, but there are some instances where it becomes a limiting factor inside the organization. What does the evaluation process look like there? What does the evaluation process look like there?
For me, and it's a great question. I hadn't really thought about it in this context. So let me just think out loud here for a second. I think if there's a problem to be solved and you've got a great problem solver, it's a great role, an opportunity for them in many, many ways. As you start needing to build out what I call scale, systems, processes, structure, a roadmap, I'd like to have somebody who's done it before so we're not learning all the lessons the hard way. So your Betty may be great to come in and put a leak in the finger in the dike so that you don't fall in your face. But as it comes time, once you're stable, to bring in the next level person to build the next level, then I think it's great to have another hand.
So let's have some fun with a couple of the other people in here. When I say pipeline Paul, what comes to mind?
Well, I've got so many examples in my life, and I'm sure you do too in the sales world, man. So pipeline Paul all entrepreneurs want a silver bullet. And usually, oftentimes we're the sales guy, or maybe we have a right hand who's a good salesperson. But as we look to go to the next level, we want to bring in somebody who can sell the big deals, right? And so Paul comes to you from a board member or a YPO member or someone else. He's usually out of work when he comes to you. We can talk about that in a second too.
Why would Paul be out of work?
Well, he just sold his company, or the last guy he worked with a jerk, or there's some reason why he's not employed. But always these in transition employees you come to us through our network and you got to hire Paul. So Paul's a silver bullet. He's a big swinging, guy. He's got this great pedigree and he plays golf with the CEO of your target pursuit company. He was best man in the wedding of another big wig name. He's always name dropping. And then as he comes on board or she comes on board, there's always something in the pipe. There's always this great rain is about to come any day now. Man, I'm having these big conversations with these big people, but the pipeline never seems to matriculate. And so we question them. And first it's like, oh, Kurt, sit down. These are big boy conversations. We're not selling mom and pops anymore. I'm selling enterprise level stuff. And then it just never seems to rain. And a year and a half in, you're like, this guy's full of crap. And finally you cut ways, and there's so many sales guys and girls with a year and a half, 2 years on their resume. I think because we finally find them out.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. It reveals itself in a couple of different ways, kind of like the bounce around Betty example. There are some instances where the pipeline Paul just happens to make a couple of bad bets inside organizations, joins an organization at the wrong time, wrong place. Product really isn't ready for pipeline Paul to deliver to a customer base. One of the red flags for me, though, is any time that either the person who is looking for the job or the person who's hiring for the job is interested in a Rolodex. And they don't call it a Rolodex anymore. It's more of the network. But if someone is interested in the Rolodex, run far, or try to reset the conversation, because the perspective is just completely off. You may play golf every day with the person who is, the head of wherever. That person's spouse might work for your competitor. So which is going to trade a little bit higher? So here's a question that I wonder. In the pipeline Paul example, why is it that the founder or the board group or the investor group or the whomever in the network always has a guy or a girl that they're going to recommend here in there? Why do they tend to have the pipeline Pauls inside their network that they're recommending?
Yeah, in many of the cases I've seen, it's often a friendship type thing, or somebody who's a friend of a friend. So they know them personally. They don't know them through business. In many examples, not all. And so, Paul's the life of the party. He knows everybody's name. He shakes your hand, looks you in the eye, and knows how to sell himself. And so, yeah, you're enamored by this silver bullet, this siren song. But hey, in fairness to Paul, here's the little tidbit for most of your entrepreneurial leaders. And I'd love your perspective on this, Mike. Paul comes sometimes from a big company where he's got all kinds of sales collateral, and he's got case studies, and he's got his big name behind him, Dell, HP, 3M, Oracle, you name it. You're Pissant Co. You don't have all that stuff. And you're the founder. You've been selling with a napkin and, showing up on somebody's doorstep. So you're able to sell it because you're the visionary and you're the key salesperson. Most of the Pauls can't do that. They need those collateral material systems, processes, CRM, all the stuff that goes into it. So in fairness to him, not all of our entrepreneur clients are ready for him. What would you think about that?
Absolutely. And I think in the discovery process or the interview process, or however you want to phrase that, you should work to understand that and work to find out scenarios where they've been able to build from 0 to 1, where they've been able to build without the name behind it. One of the companies I worked for was called Safari. If I say Safari out loud, what comes to mind for you?
African Safari.
Yeah. So African Safari. Another one that jumps up, or the browser by Apple, is a books online subscription-based book product reference or library that you would deliver inside an organization to help people do the work that they wanted to do better, specifically technical professionals. So software developers, right? So nobody knew who Safari was. And that would be the response is you'd get, I thought this was about children's books, or I thought this was about going on vacation, or I thought, why is the Apple browser, why is someone from Apple contacting me? And so you run into those challenges inside organizations. And again, it's that piece of, I'm a technical founder. I haven't yet been able to figure this out. I know if someone's telling me I have to bring in a salesperson, I'm going to go ahead and hire really big so that they can go operate on their own. And I bring in the wrong person at the right time. The other challenge that ends up happening that puts someone like Pipeline Paul at a bit of a disadvantage out in the marketplace, depending on what their level of experience is as a founder, when the customer says something, I can react pretty quickly to where we're going, how we're going to do something. We can get into that founder magic, founder vision type stuff. Well, the person I bring in doesn't have that same capability. They don't have that same capacity. They don't have that same access to information. So there are a couple of reasons why that person doesn't necessarily fit inside the organization. And unfortunately, we manufacture fit around it. I think the worst one, though, is when Pipeline Paul is coming in to play startup because they want startup experience on their resume. And you've got, what is it? Is it Resume Ralph? Resume Ralph. So Resume Ralph. Let's talk about Resume Ralph. Who's Resume Ralph?
Resume Ralph is somewhat similar, but he comes from a big company experience for sure. And he's got a rootin' tootin' resume that, looks fantastic on paper, but he's ready he wants that startup on his resume. He wants the equity, but he doesn't want to work. Like he didn't realize it's not a 9 to 3 job in the startup world. he didn't realize he's got to bust his hump, and he's expecting his fiefdom of 10 to 20 direct reports like he had at Oracle to do all the work for him. And he just didn't have that luxury in a 3-person startup.
I've got people. Come on.
That's right. We've got so many great stories on that one too. A guy came in and immediately wanted to hire a bunch of consultants to do his job for him. We're like, dude, we don't have money for consultants. We barely have money for you. You were a big bet.
Why is that not understood as part of the process? Like, why do we miss on that? Because it happens over and over again. People either want to bring in a team. There's not expectations. I ran into a conversation with someone where I said, I don't know if I need to have a conversation with you to buy a dry erase marker, show the dry erase marker, the car that's sitting out in our driveway, or the house that I'm living in. And unfortunately, we had that conversation too late. So why is it that why do we struggle with having those conversations early in the process? Yeah,
I'm going to say something that may be controversial, but I've just seen it consistently over and over again. And most entrepreneurs suck at hiring. We just suck. If we follow some methodology, top grading, whatever it is, we go all full in and maybe we're good, maybe we're not. But too often we just fall for whatever someone's selling us. And we're in a hurry, and that's the silver bullet. Ralph is going to solve my problems. I'm going to bring him on. And then 6 months later, you realize what a horrible hire it was. And you're 6 months behind. He's wasted a boatload of money. You probably have to buy him out. I mean, we got to get it better on the front end.
How many times have you ever come across a silver bullet? Have you ever found a silver bullet?
Man, I've looked for them all over the place. Let me tell you that. Rarely. Let's put it that way.
There's no quick fixes or shortcuts out there. Like if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. And I think it's funny. So there's a founder listening to this, there's an entrepreneur who's listening to this, there's someone who's leading an organization listening to this. I'm sure you're spending a lot of time going out there and recruiting. Well, in that instance, you're recruiting and you're selling people on the vision. You're trying to build up this stable. And then by the time you actually go through the process of hiring, you've likely sold yourself on this idea of this person coming in and being able to do this thing. So now you've created some really interesting blind spots for yourself because you've been working on recruiting that person for a period of time. What do you think, Kurt?
I think that's true if you've taken the time to do it. I think we all go into sales mode. We're selling them on our, maybe shitty opportunity or our small company opportunity. We feel we've got to really oversell. We're selling them on our vision. And we're not doing a great job of really determining if they've got the skills and experience necessary and the grit necessary to do what we need them to do at our company.
So let's talk about Techno Tim.
You're picking all my silver bullet guys. All right, let's go.
Tell me about Techno Tim.
Oh man, Techno Tim we've all known folks who are just the smartest guy in the room, right? They're just, what does it stink? And everyone around them is an idiot and you got to do it their way. And at first you fall for they're so smart, kind of mentality. And then later you're scared to get rid of them because what if they are that smart and you can't bring anybody smarter? So sometimes they're really, really good and they're just jerks. And sometimes they're not really good and they're also jerks. So they're addition by subtraction many times when it comes to your company. A lot of us entrepreneurs, like I'm not a tech guy. If I were to start a tech company, might have an idea, but I would go find me a tech person and I would be so in the dark. I would be relying on them so much to get it done. And I would buy whatever they're telling me until I couldn't afford it anymore.
And when you think about this person, would you look at technology as both ones and zeros and technical process? So technical capability, like a technical understanding of an expertise. Could you look at it through both of those lenses, the understanding of things from a technology perspective, but also the understanding of a technical capability?
Yeah. And I would even add any kind of SME. So you could be an engineering firm or an architecture firm, CPA firm, whatever it is, somewhere where you need really smart people on your team to help you sell your service or what have you.
In that kind of an instance, are you better off? Is there a time and a place for outsourcing those kind of roles where you can use that kind of capability to build an expertise inside your organization? Or is that not the right approach to go?
I think there's no one size fits all for sure, say that. But maybe similar to what your business does. I assume you come in and help them assess their sales organization and you do it on a fractional basis or a project basis. Yep. I think that might be an interesting way to start. It depends on really what the situation for the company is. If I need to be best in breed in that technology, I might have to go spend a lot of time and find the right person.
Yeah. Why is hiring so hard? Like, why do we suck at hiring? Why is it hard?
Yeah, we covered a little bit of it just with us, most of us being glass half full folks and trying to sell what we're doing versus really vet their capabilities. And I think it's easy to we're human and we want to trust the other human across from us. We want to believe in them. So if they say they can do it, and it's just hard work. I tell my team, look, I'm looking in the mirror when I say this, Mike, I suck at hiring. Oh. I tell my team, nobody comes in front of me until you're 1,000% sure, because I'm going to like everybody. I'm going to find a reason why Mike could be, Mike, you got some numbers on that whiteboard. Come be my CFO, right? that's just who I am.
You've made a complete mistake because that is the weakest part of my capability. Like I shouldn't even, my numbers usually don't go any further than get what, 2 or 3 integers maybe, or if that's even the right way to say it. But looks can be deceiving. Looks can be deceiving.
Well, you look like a doctor back there with your
mad scientist meets physicist meets sales professional meets a little bit of crazy. I think is probably the right way to look at it. So Harry the Hustler. Who's
another one? Yeah, he's another guy. And by the way, there's some male, some female characters. So if you're getting all wrapped around the axle, we tried not to make all one or the other. But anyway, Harry the Hustler, he's your sales guy that for the entrepreneur, he's really carrying the organization. He can sell everything you've got. He's followed you around, learned everything. And so he's your main sales agent. But now you're ready to scale. And so you've reached the 2 million, 3 million, whatever dollar mark, mainly behind Harry. And you say, what do we do next? Well, a lot of folks go hire a bunch of junior Harrys. You've heard that, I'm sure, in your
absolutely. Yep.
The other is we promote Harry to VP of sales, which is another common mistake. Well, Harry was a great salesperson. You hired him right out of college and he just learned everything and was able to sell. That doesn't make him a great sales leader or to be able to build the sales collateral, sales process, sales methodology, all the stuff we talked about earlier. So if you do promote him and he's not ready, then now you've lost sales, Harry, your best sales guy, and you probably have Harry, a crappy manager.
I think this is one of those areas where organizations could do a really good job if they found a coach for someone like Harry that could help. One, you got to understand why Harry wants to move into that role. And does Harry want to move into that role? Because sometimes that role is not what it seems. And that's not what Harry wants to do. Like Harry thrives when he's in front of a customer or Harriet, whoever, but they thrive when they're in front of the customer. They get a lot of energy out of that. Now, all of a sudden, you've put them in a role where they're trying to help people be an extension of the team, and they're not selling the way that Barry sells, and they don't understand why. And then they're creating some tension, and they jump in. And Harry doesn't necessarily have the background of a coach. It doesn't know what this stuff looks like. This is one of those areas where I think we do our teammates a disservice by promoting them into those roles because they think that's the next thing they should do. We've not evaluated whether or not it is or why they want to do it. And then we forget to put the support resources in there because we believe, if they're hard charging and excited and interested in it, they're going to go figure it out and they're going to go find somebody else. And I can tell you that first time you do it, it's lonely.
Yeah, you've hit on it. So I think we need to understand why Harry wants that role. Does he want the prestige? Does he want the title? Does he want more money? Does he want whatever? And maybe it's for the wrong reasons. Now, if you think he's coachable and has the skills to do it eventually, I would absolutely agree with you. Bring in a coach and help him get there. But sometimes they don't know what they're getting into. Right. They just think it's a promotion. And so now Harry is going through call reports and managing your pipeline and holding you accountable. And he's not selling. So he's not making any money because he's not on commission anymore. So you just really screwed the pooch on this one. But if you have open and honest conversations with Harry and you understand what his goals are, what you need to do as an organization, I think you can make something work. But it's not just promote. There's a lot of things that can go wrong.
I forget if you mentioned this in the book or not, but like I've been fortunate enough to be in certain roles where I had a team number and I had an individual number at the same time. And I had multiple ways to hit a number and I felt pretty comfortable with spreading things out and developing a team. Sometimes you run into a challenge where that happens and then Harry wants to hold on to everything. Did you touch on that?
I did. And sometimes it's not even real. Sometimes it's just, hey, this is a big client, so I want to make sure that we win it. So I'm going to take it. And now your other salespeople are like, wait a minute, why is Harry getting all the big deals? So
if you're listening to this and saying, does this stuff really happen? It absolutely happens. And if you're listening to this and saying, oh, wow, I thought I was alone, you're not alone. So let's talk about some of the roles that can really amplify and accelerate what's happening inside the organization as we start making some of those later stage hires. What do those look like as we start building out things like executive teams, or we start building out operational capability? Let's say I'm a founder who's got this amazing vision and I love moving toward what's next. I need someone to help keep me on the rails, though, so that I don't run the entire organization ragged, chasing a bunch of other things. Where do I look?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to generalize here for a second, so bear with me. I think that most entrepreneurs fall into what Rocket Fuel, Mark Winters and Gino Wickman's book calls a visionary.
Okay.
So we're not really great at operations, holding people accountable, systems, and all that stuff. They call that position an integrator. I call it an operating partner, somebody to manage all the stuff I just talked about. I tell people, I can tell you I want to charge that hill and I can inspire you and we're going to charge that flipping hill. But I need somebody next to me that's telling me, okay, we're going to leave at 10 a.m. We're going to, here's a packing list and you're going to be responsible for this, Kurt, and you're going to be responsible for this. And we're going to make it based on their organizational skills. So I think that's what most founders need, is that operating partner. In the book, I call it Next Level Natalie. We've got a few chapters on her. She is absolutely the linchpin to your growth prospects. The other thing I would say on this topic, Mike, is oftentimes it's not necessarily a full-time hire, because that can get pretty expensive. You might consider a sales coach like what you guys do at Catalyst. You might consider an executive coach like some of our CEO coaching partners. You might consider a coach in these various aspects to help augment your team.
Let's talk a bit about the difference between bringing someone in like that versus whether it's a fractional basis or a consulting basis versus hiring it inside the team, or maybe even building the capability inside the team. Can a next level Natalie come from within the organization?
So the short answer is yes. My caution to that, and this is one of my problems with Rocket Fuel, is that person has to be able to push back against the founder. You have to be partners. Yeah. And you have to view it like that. And if you're still considered an employee by you and or the entrepreneur, and their way is still the highway, their way, it's not going to work, because you've got to be able to listen and push each other and come up with the right answer together, not necessarily the entrepreneur's answer.
So a founder who has a command and control type leadership style is probably going to create a rough situation for next level Natalie when she comes into the organization and starts pushing back.
So that's a really great point there, Mike. I call it an epilogue. It's called When You're the Problem. And that is when, no matter how great a person we recruit, you recruit, Mike recruits, if you're still an a-hole and a command and control person, you might run off whoever it is. And we just can't help you. So it's a fun story and it's real. But here's the deal. No matter who you bring in that next level Natalie category, they're going to do things differently than you would do. By definition, you're a founder that's just going by the seat of your pants. You need that system structure and operational, all that stuff. So the next person is going to bring in accountability. That's the number one reason I tell founders, don't let your team hire this person. Don't let them even interview. You can let them meet them socially, but don't let them interview and grill them, because if Natalie is going to be the right person to hold them accountable, most legacy teams they like the status quo. They don't like to be held accountable.
So, they might have a struggle with change. Like, that's not how things used to be around here. Back, exactly. I remember the good old days when I used to be able to go through and do this and just pick up the phone and call Susie to help me with this thing.
Exactly. Now, look, and the reality is some of your team members simply aren't going to make it. Yeah. And I told my Natalie, that there are certain members of the team that I want to have every chance in the world to succeed. They're so important to me, but no one's untouchable. Because if I saddled my operating partner with untouchable employees, that's a non-starter. It's just not possible.
Where did the breakthrough come from for you, where you started to realize, I need this? I've not created an environment where Natalie can be successful. What was your experience there?
So in my last company, it was called the Controller Group. We grew to $20 million over a 5-year period, another service firm, and it was great. I had an operating partner named Brett Lawson. I didn't know about the integrator concept back then, but he was very much that. We were partners, yin to yang. We argued all the time, but we just had a great working relationship. When I bought HireBetter, it was just me. And I had an employee who basically served as my operating partner, but she would push back, but I wouldn't listen, or I would convince her. And before you knew it, I quote this in the book, at some point about 5 years in, we had a lifestyle business for everybody on the team but me. So I'm working my tail off. Everyone else is, this is kind of a fun job. And so it just became unbearable. And I brought in one of my YPO forum friends to say, help me figure out what's wrong. And that was his quote. You built a lifestyle business for everybody but you.
It's awesome. How'd it feel?
I was pissed at myself, man. How did I let this happen? Like, I felt like a failure. And to disclose it among, your 10 million audience members, Mike, and to write a book about it, it took some guts. But I think other founders and other entrepreneurs need to hear those stories because they need to know that they're not alone, and you can learn from these stories.
They are not alone. And I think that's a key thing to realize is you're not alone. There's so many different examples that are out there where people are sharing stories. And, unfortunately, there's also a lot of crap out there where the highlight reel is all of this other stuff. And you see the highlight reel always looks good. It looks produced. It looks cut. It's photoshopped. It's whatever. And the reality is a lot different than that. And I think it's books like this, it's stories like yours, it's getting that information out in front of others where people can start to feel like, we talk about this thing being a journey. It really is a journey. And each of those instances we can learn. And we've got to be comfortable asking for help, raising your hand and just asking for help. So what was the thing that triggered the calling your friend within YPO and saying, hey, I need another set of eyes on this. Can you do this? And I know you talked about, hey, I built a lifestyle business for everybody else except me. But what was it like when you made the call?
Well, the reason I ultimately made the call is we were still growing fairly rapidly. But whenever, my team, who I had built to scale, right? We were investing in scale. We were just throwing bodies at problems. We're unprofitable. My credit line and credit, everything was going up. I wasn't making anything and everything, we were just losing money.
Yeah.
And so it's just unsustainable. And frankly, I didn't need the job. I'm like, what am I doing this for? And so making the call was embarrassing. And I felt like I would rather make the call and have a real discussion with a friend that I trusted as opposed to shutting down the business or continuing to flounder.
Yeah.
So I swallowed my pride and did it.
There you go. You shut down the business, you impact everybody inside the business. You continue to flounder, you impact yourself, you impact your family. I think it's okay to ask those questions. It's okay to raise your hand. It's okay to ask for help. Kurt, absolutely awesome conversation. What's something else that you'd like to add to folks? We've covered a number of the characters that you've worked through, shared your personal story, helped inspire the book and was drawn out inside the book. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the discussion?
Mike, we tell the stories, we want to learn through the stories, but we do have what we call intermissions, which are areas where it's quasi-advice. It can help entrepreneurs through their challenges. The biggest question we get from people who have read the book or people who are familiar with the topic is, how do I know if I've got a mic? How do I know if I've got an employee that I've outgrown? And so we've got 4 questions in intermission 1. I'll just go over them real briefly for your audience because they're so powerful. Number 1 is, knowing today what you know about your organization and where you're going, would you enthusiastically rehire Mike in this example to be your next level CFO? Enthusiastically in that role, in the same role. Now, a lot of these questions were borrowed and stolen and from people like Vern Harnish, Gino Wickman, and others. So that's one question. The next question is, does Mike have the skills, experience, and tools to get us to the next level? However you define that. And oftentimes you look back and say, man, Mike there's no way, not next level. Maybe he's a good individual contributor, but not next level. And the last 2 questions are more what I call gut check questions. They're not scientific, but they'll give you a pretty good idea. Number 1 is, what if I had a team full of Mikes? How would that make me feel? And oftentimes we're like, holy smokes, that'd be chaotic. Mike's a drama king, or Mike's always behind, or whatever. And so it just gives you a gut feel. And the last one is, what if Mike came into my office tomorrow and quit? Would I be relieved? Would I be scared? Beyond the initial, like, oh crap, there's going to be change coming. That's natural. But beyond that, would I be relieved? That helps you, gives you a little bit of frame up of what Mike's long-term potential is.
Those are 4 really, really powerful questions and reinforce why I had trouble sleeping while reading and listening to the book, because they create so the other thing that you can do is you can take those questions and ask yourself those questions about you in the current role that you have inside your organization so that you can reflect on what you're doing? And would you hire you? If you quit, how would you feel? And these are really powerful questions. Kurt, where can we send people to find out more about what you're working on? Go a bit deeper into this. We'll include links in the show notes. Where can we send folks?
We've got a website, who'syourmic.com, for any information about the book. But one thing I would highlight is a quiz that we created, kind of a fun quiz to see if you have some of these situations. It's simply who'syourmic.com/quiz.
Awesome. Kurt, thank you very much for the awesome conversation. Again, we'll include links in the show notes. If you know of someone who would value this conversation, enjoy this conversation, get something out of this conversation, I'm sure they will relate to this conversation. Please share it. Let Kurt and I know via LinkedIn. We like seeing those shares. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?